U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin are expected to sit down for talks this afternoon. They are meeting in Alaska to discuss a possible ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy was not invited. With Ukraine sidelined, Zelenskyy says that, quote, Ukraine is counting on America. So let's get a sense of how all of this is being watched in Ukraine. Emmanuelle Chaze is a correspondent for the France 24 network, and she joins us today from Kyiv. So, Emmanuelle, thank you for joining us today. We do appreciate your time. I'm hoping that you can help us understand what Ukrainians' expectations are of this meeting.
Well, it's been quite a few particular days here in Ukraine because everything that was talked about Kyiv was done so without the main concerned, without Ukrainians. And that's very much a fear in the population here that Ukrainians won't have anything to say in any future negotiations regarding the country. So there's that fear. First, because Volodymyr Zelenskyy, as you mentioned, is not present to that encounter between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. There's also a hope that was voiced by the Ukrainian president earlier that America will manage to put enough pressure on Vladimir Putin so that he will finally agree to a meeting with Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and then that further discussions would follow. However, there's, to be honest, there is no hope there that Russia would be genuine at wanting a peace with Ukraine. This is not what we see on the ground. This is not what Ukrainians have been used to, not only since 2022, but also since 2014, with Russia violating time and again treaties, ceasefires that it had agreed to.
Emmanuelle, what about the potential here of Ukraine giving up territory? That is something that the U.S. president has been asked about. As recently as today, he said that this would be Ukraine's decision. But the fact that it's even on the table being spoken about, is there a sense in Ukraine right now of some sort of sense of resignation when it comes to territory?
Well, not really, because this question of territory is crucial for Ukrainians. First off, on a constitutional standpoint, it is impossible for Ukraine to abandon those territories because that would violate the territorial integrity of the country. Second, people are living on those territories. Millions of Ukrainians are living under illegal Russian rule in occupied territories, and we know what this means in terms of human rights and violation of human rights. We know that it means when people on those territories that are under occupation don't comply with the occupation authorities. Some are deported, some are put in prison, others are tortured. So Ukrainians who are in free Ukraine do not want to abandon those territories. They, on the contrary, even if they see de facto that those territories will be very, very difficult to recover, at least in the near future, they still do not want to abandon the idea that at some point the territorial integrity of Ukraine will be restored.
I do want to get your reaction here to a statement that President Zelenskyy put out on Telegram just a short time ago. And part of it says, quote, on the day of the negotiations, they, as in the Russian army here, they also kill people. And that says a lot. He also said that there's no indication from Moscow at this point that it wants the war to be over. So what is your reaction to Zelensky's statement today?
Well, it's really interesting because today, Hillary, we've got several air raid alerts here in the capital. That was also the case elsewhere in the country because Russian bombs were launched against Ukrainian civilians in the city of Sumy. This is just a few hours train away from Kyiv. The central market was hit by Russian bombs in the cities of Zaporizhia and Dnipro. Civilian infrastructures were also hit today. On the front line, Russian offensives also continue. There's, as we speak, there are some Russian advances that Ukraine says that it has under control as of now in the Donetsk region, in the eastern part of the country, with Russia really putting pressure in that area on the Ukrainian army. That's in the between the pockets of Kostiantynivka and of Pokrovsk. So from a Ukrainian perspective, from here on the ground, it is very hard to see any will at all from the Russian side to stop its aggression, be it through the air raids that are launched time and again against Ukraine or on the front line where intense fighting continues.
And just finally here, Emmanuelle, so that intense fighting continues. You were talking a little bit there about what it's like on the front right now. The other thing that we heard from Zelenskyy was that some sort of attempted new assault in the east by Russia, that had failed. So what is the latest on that?
So this is quite an interesting story on the front line. A few days ago, we've heard about some Russians who had apparently breached into Ukrainian defense lines. And of course, Russia presented that as a victory, as a swift breach of Ukrainian defenses. On the Ukrainian side, however, the army immediately said, OK, there was some elements, some saboteurs who came through, but they didn't manage to just get a foothold in this area. They just managed to pass through. It's only a couple of units, a couple of individuals. However, Kyiv also sent additional units and some elite units of its armies to fight off those of the Russian soldiers who had crossed that line. Russia also said that it had reached a strategic axis, the road between Dobropilya and Kramatorsk. That is something that Kyiv also denies. Kyiv says that this is another informational war and disinformation on Russian side to put pressure on Kyiv ahead of the talks between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin.
Okay, Emmanuelle, we are going to leave it there for today, but thank you for this. Emmanuelle Chaze reporting for us there from Kyiv.